The other day, May 1st, was Workers' Day. Leaving a cafe that morning, I saw some posters pasted up on a bus stop. Apparently, there was a protest happening later that day, just 2 or 3 blocks from my house. Since part of my writing process involves going to events in order to report on them, I went. Don't get me wrong, I was sure I wasn't going to enjoy the Workers' Day protest, and I wasn't hoping to meet any interesting people there. But I might get ideas for the blog or the podcast. Anything for my fans. So after Chinese lunch with Morena, a brief nap, and some coffee with heavy cream, I headed down to the plaza outside the church to see what those feisty syndicalists were up to. It's 5:30 p.m., May 1st, 2026, and you are listening to Radio Free Barcelona. I'm just kidding. Hey everyone, it's Daniel. Welcome back to Spain to Go, the best podcast in the entire multiverse for all things Spain. I think that present tense, it's May 1st, 5:30 p.m. thing works a little bit better on the written version of this article. Anyway, this is episode 140, and we're talking about Workers' Day, which was several days ago on May 1st. Thank you very much for choosing Spain to Go. I have a shout out today for JR. JR is a multi-donor. This is, I believe, the 4th time he's donated. I've since been in email correspondence with JR, and it turns out that he's teaching real estate at San Jacinto College out in Texas. So he's a real estate broker and also a college professor, and he's thrilled when I talk about real estate. I don't think I've ever mentioned this here on the podcast, but every time my wife Morena and I go to a new neighborhood in Barcelona or really anywhere, she pulls out her phone and she's like looking at houses and mentally moving us to this neighborhood. Anyway, JR is impressed with my wordsmithing here on the podcast. So he sent some money. Head over to expatmadrid.com/donate if you would like to receive a shout out on a future episode. Just send your donation. It can be anything from 10 euros on up to however much you want. expatmadrid.com/donate is the page for that. I appreciate it. I'm just a solo content creator trying to get by in a world of AI slop. So anything you can send helps. And like JR, a lot of people donate multiple times. So if you've donated before, don't worry. You can still donate again, and you can join the even more prestigious category of Spain to Go multi-donors. Once again, that's expatmadrid.com/donate. Thank you very much. Let's get back to Workers' Day. The reason for the Workers' Day protest being so near my house in the Barrio de Clot is that there's a new labor union office nearby on Carrer de Aragó, Sindicato de Comisiones de Base. Co.bas, as it's usually called, and stylized with a lowercase c, if not at the beginning of a sentence, is a union formed from a split within Comisiones Obreras, Spain's largest labor organization. According to their website, it seems that a faction of former members decided that the leaders of Comisiones Obreras were getting too cozy with the government and the business associations, and that they had lost touch with the concerns of actual workers. Co.bas hopes to reignite the working class struggle with a more democratic, grassroots union. In Spain, most people work under some sort of collective bargaining agreement made by the labor unions in negotiation with business associations and the government. So if you're working in a Spanish company, you will hear about this. Los sindicatos are the unions. El patronal is the association of business owners within your industry. And el convenio is the collective bargaining agreement. Back when I was in the US, I had barely heard of this, but it does exist. I think professional athletes occasionally would go on strike, and so I knew about collective bargaining agreements from the NBA strike in, whatever year that was. Back when I was an English teacher in Madrid, I worked under El Convenio de Enseñanza No Reglada, an agreement for the sort of unofficial teaching that is not recognized by the Ministry of Education. Salaries and working conditions are set according to these convenios, and unions in theory negotiate on behalf of the workers, although when I was working, I wasn't a union member and never talked to anyone who was. All this to say, it seems to me like the larger unions here in Spain are more like pseudo-government bureaucracies, and they may well be far removed from the class struggle of people earning 1,200 euros a month. So co.bas probably has a legitimate complaint with Comisiones Obreras. Back at the Workers' Day protests on May 1st, there's a girl walking around wearing a Palestinian scarf tied around her midsection as a sort of improvised top. She seems to be one of the organizers. Most of the people who come out look like the type who become public school teachers. They're dressed in typical Spanish leftist fashion, with mullets and colorful hiking outfits, despite being on a normal plaza on a warm spring afternoon. There are a couple hundred people total. 3 younger guys are sitting on the church steps in full punk regalia with mohawks, tight pants, combat boots, and belts made of rifle bullets. A girl hands me a flyer about an upcoming event. It's in Catalan, but from what I gather, the event will explore the housing situation through the lens of feminism and dissident identities. Apparently, that means people who don't conform to the cis-heteropatriarchal gender binary. All the other flyer people look me up and down and decide I'm not Catalan and just ignore me. I've actually worn my orange fleece jumper to blend in here at the protest. I got it for 9 euros from Decathlon, and it's the most leftist thing I own. But apparently I still stick out like a sore thumb among real Catalan syndicalists. Some guy in a black hoodie pulls out a can of paint and starts spraying graffiti across the front of the church. Free the anarchist political prisoners is the basic gist of it. He writes the A's in the message as little anarchy signs with circles around them. Around 6 p.m., a guy who seems to be in his early 20s hops onto a flatbed truck with speakers on it, and the protest moves away. I stay on the plaza for a bit. The merch tables where you can buy communist stickers or the works of Marx and Lenin in pamphlet form start to pack up. I briefly consider asking the guy with the Karl Marx beard if he'll give me a copy of the Communist Manifesto for free because of socialism, but I decide against it. Police cars escort the group down Meridiana, where I catch up with them. Protest flags wave, there's a big No to NATO banner, and 2 or 3 people leading chants with bullhorns. They're doing multiple chants simultaneously, which may be a metaphor for the current state of leftist thought, or just bad planning. The main one is Visca la luita de la clase obrera. Of course, they do it with a certain rhythm and presumably a better Catalan accent. It means, basically, long live the working class struggle. A lot of the people marching down Meridiana are wearing co.bas stickers on their t-shirts. Others are carrying flags for the local tenants' unions, which have been threatening to go on strike over the housing crisis. And of course, there are Catalan señeras, a few hammers and sickles, and a couple of Palestinian flags waving gently in the breeze. A minute later, the next chant starts up, anti-capitalista. Anti-capitalista. Are these people working class? Does a Catalan working class still exist at all? I have my doubts about this. Most of the traditional working-class jobs these days are done by immigrants from countries much poorer than Spain. Immigrants also do the new jobs that just suck: Amazon delivery people, Uber Eats riders, etc. There are a lot of Pakistanis riding bikes around Barcelona with boxes of croissants on their backs for home delivery to the breakfast-in-bed classes. Not many Catalans are doing jobs like that. And I'm not convinced by class in the Marxist sense anyway. There may have been a time in which society was neatly divided between bourgeoisie and proletarians, but these days things are more complicated, and they probably were back in the 19th century too. Karl Marx assumed that the urban proletariat was the only true revolutionary class. He didn't guess that someday most people in Europe would identify as middle class and own houses and work in air-conditioned offices. Marx was, and I will never tire of pointing this out, wrong about virtually everything. The co.bas labor union has a list of demands up on their website. It's pretty standard stuff. Basically, it amounts to a higher minimum salary, a 35-hour work week, and retroactive raises for everyone to offset the rising costs of housing. There's also a bit about how capitalism is drowning us and it's all the fault of imperialist wars. The solution? Redistribute the wealth. That's a popular thing to say, of course, redistribute the wealth. But the math doesn't really work out. People like to think that if global wealth were redistributed, they would end up with more than they have now. But the chances are they wouldn't. I've been to Asia. I've seen the slums in Mumbai. If global wealth were redistributed, everyone in Asia and Africa would get a few $1,000 each, and you and me here in the West would be left with next to nothing. After a few blocks, the protest turns left on Carrer de Badajoz in order to walk the empty streets of Poblano. It's an odd route to take because nobody is around Poblano on weekends or holidays. The only people in sight are the security guards who come out of the office buildings to watch the column go by. The guy up in front on the flatbed is leading another chant about La Clase Trabajadora. Back where I am, the No to NATO people start up a new chant themselves. A full-figured individual with short purple hair and a high squeaky voice leads them in Desde el río fins al mar, Palestina, Libertad. That's where I decide to check out. I'm mostly tolerant of these sorts of people, even if I don't agree with them. But the casual attitude towards anti-Semitism of the Spanish left drives me up the wall. It doesn't help that the anti-Semitism is usually mixed with anti-Americanism and, these days, an attack on several other aspects of my identity. I guess I'm not intersectional enough. When I was younger, I used to sympathize with Marxists and anarchists. The whole thing was an edgy pose that late teenage me adopted, unburdened by any information about how the economy works or the actual history of communist states and anarchist movements. Basically, it annoyed my parents and teachers, so I believed it. I did a book report on Volume 1 of Das Kapital for AP English class. I had a Vladimir Lenin t-shirt that I bought online. But Karl Marx thought that capitalism would inevitably create more poverty, and as I mentioned earlier, he was wrong. In fact, capitalism made the average person much, much richer. Rich enough to care about work-life balance and faraway geopolitical conflicts, and whether their sexuality is being celebrated by local businesses and governments. Rich enough to buy a keffiyeh made in the West Bank, or a punk belt made of rifle bullets, or a Vladimir Lenin t-shirt. Rich enough that their lives would seem like an unimaginable luxury to a working-class person in 1848. That's about all I've got for today. I hope you're having a good day wherever you are in the world. George Orwell sure seemed to think that society was divided between bourgeoisie and the proletarians when he visited Barcelona during the Spanish Civil War. You can read more about that in my article on Homage to Catalonia, or maybe it's Homage to Catalonia, I'm not sure. It's actually an episode of the podcast also. Check out episode 37, Homage to Catalonia. And while we're on the topic, I've got a couple of other podcast episodes about Spain's relationship to Israel. That's been quite newsworthy recently. One is about the Vuelta de España, which was boycotted because of the participation of a team with the word Israel in the name. I later heard that there was maybe one Israeli person actually on this team. Anyway, it was a huge deal. That is episode 120, Spain Boycotts Israel. I also have an episode called 15 Million Bullets. That's about Spain trying to supply its military and at the same time not support Israeli industry. 15 Million Bullets is episode 108. So check that out if you would like. Once again, go to expatmadrid.com/donate if you would like to donate to the cause here. expatmadrid.com/donate. I will appreciate it forever. I'll also give you a shout out on the next episode of the podcast. That is expatmadrid.com/donate. Over on YouTube, Learn Spanish with Daniel. I have been talking about real estate lately. I have a video or two about real estate vocabulary up there. Just look for Learn Spanish with Daniel on YouTube and you will find me. I did a video recently about the different types of houses. So I talk about flats houses, detached houses, different vocabulary relating to the types of buildings you'll probably be living in, all kinds of important stuff. I think I also did a separate video on mortgage vocabulary. I don't even remember. I do a lot of stuff over there. So Learn Spanish with Daniel. Quite a lot of useful vocabulary for your Spanish real estate journey. If you are coming to Spain anytime soon, I highly recommend Walks Tours. Go to expatmadrid.com/walks, expatmadrid.com/walks. They organize tours in various impressive locations around Spain and the rest of Europe. I did the Prado Museum early morning tour a couple of years ago. It was fantastic. They also do Sagrada Familia here in Barcelona and other things. The Sagrada Familia tour is in the afternoon, so you can see the sunlight coming through the stained glass. That's exactly when you want to visit Sagrada Familia from what I have heard. Anyway, sign up for a tour at Walks Tours, expatmadrid.com/walks. I get a commission if you sign up over there. So that's another way of supporting the podcast. If you would prefer something with more calories, please check out Devour Tours. Devour Tours was started by my friend Lauren over 10 years ago. They're now all over Europe as well. expatmadrid.com/devour. expatmadrid.com/devour. DEVOUR. They have food tours and market tours as well in Madrid, Barcelona, Sevilla, and San Sebastian, I think, here in Spain. The list of destinations sometimes changes. So if you're looking at this in a couple of years, it might be different. But expatmadrid.com/devour. Just sign up for a food tour. They're great. I went to the one around Plaza Mayor in Madrid a few years ago. Had a great time. They're also in Italy. I saw one of the Devour tours happening in a local market in Rome when we were there a couple of years ago. And they're in France. They're in various places around Europe if you're going somewhere else other than Spain. Just check it out. expatmadrid.com/devour. Once again, affiliate link, I get a small commission if you sign up for something there. Nada más por hoy. Espero que pases un muy buen día, estés donde estés en el mundo. Thank you once again for listening. We'll be back in a week or so with another episode. So like and subscribe to the podcast. Leave me a review if you're on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts or, wherever you are. If there's the possibility of leaving a review, please do so. I appreciate it. Once again, from beautiful Barcelona, thanks for listening. Hasta la próxima. Bye.